The rain was hammering against my apartment windows in downtown Seattle when I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps, then nothing. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in October, and I wasn't expecting anyone. My delivery apps showed no orders, and my friends knew better than to show up unannounced, especially during one of Seattle's notorious autumn storms. I paused my Netflix show, some true crime documentary that had been keeping me company while I worked on my laptop, and listened. The knock came again, more urgent this time. 5 rapid knocks that seemed to echo through my one-bedroom apartment like gunshots. "Who is it?" I called out, but the howling wind outside seemed to swallow my voice. I approached the door cautiously, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Through the peephole, I could see a figure hunched over, soaked to the bone. The hallway light was dim, casting long shadows that made it impossible to make out any clear features. The person was wearing a dark coat, hood pulled up, and seemed to be swaying slightly. My heart started racing. Living alone in the city, especially as a 35-year-old woman, you learn to trust your instincts. Something about this felt wrong. But then again, it was pouring outside, and whoever this was looked like they were in distress. "I'm sorry, but I can't open the door unless you identify yourself," I said, pressing my face closer to the peephole. The figure looked up, and for a split second, I thought I saw something familiar in the shadowy features, but it was impossible to be sure in the dim light. "Emma," came a hoarse voice from the other side. "Emma, it's me." My blood turned to ice. That voice, deeper now, weathered by time and what sounded like years of smoking. But there was something unmistakably familiar about it. Something that reached into the deepest corners of my memory and pulled out images I'd spent decades trying to forget. "Who are you?" I whispered, even though part of me was terrified of the answer. "Emma, please. I know this is impossible to believe, but it's me. It's David, your father." The world tilted. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, my legs suddenly feeling like they were made of water. My father? The man who had walked out of our house in Portland when I was 7 years old, promising he'd be back in a few days, and then vanished like smoke in the wind. "That's impossible," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "My father is dead." "No, Emma, I'm not dead. I'm here. I'm right here, and I'm not doing well. Please, I need help." The desperation in his voice was palpable, but I couldn't move. My body felt frozen, caught between the impulse to run and the need to know if this was real. My father had been dead to me for 28 years. My mother had told me he died in a car accident when I was 12, finally giving me closure on why he never came back, why he never called, why he never sent so much as a birthday card. "Prove it," I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "If you're really my father, prove it." There was a long pause, and I could hear labored breathing from the other side of the door. Then, in a voice that sounded like it was being torn from his throat, he said, "You had a stuffed elephant, pink with purple ears. You called her Eleanor, and you took her everywhere. When you were 6, you accidentally left her at the grocery store, and I drove back at midnight to get her because you couldn't sleep without her." My legs gave out. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, staring at the wood grain inches from my face. Eleanor. I hadn't thought about Eleanor in years. My mother had thrown her away when I was a teenager, saying I was too old for stuffed animals. But she had been my constant companion, my protector, my confidant. And yes, my father had driven back to get her that night. I remembered because it was the last clear memory I had of him being kind to me. "The night before you left," I said, my voice cracking, "you read me Where the Wild Things Are 3 times because I couldn't fall asleep. You did different voices for all the monsters. And you made me promise that Max would always make it home safe," came the reply, so soft I almost didn't hear it over the rain. I stood up on shaking legs and slowly turned the deadbolt, then the chain lock, then the regular lock. Each click sounded like a gunshot in the silence. When I finally opened the door, the man standing there was both a stranger and the most familiar person in the world. He was thin, gaunt really, with graying hair that was plastered to his head from the rain. His face was weathered and lined, with deep circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard living. But his eyes were the same pale blue I remembered, the same eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. "Emma," he said, and his voice broke on my name. "My little girl." He took a step forward, and I instinctively took a step back. This was too much, too fast. Too many years of anger and abandonment and grief to process in a single moment. "I'm not your little girl anymore," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I felt 7 years old again, standing in the living room of our old house, waiting for him to come home. "I know," he said, and I could see tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. "I know I have no right to call you that. I have no right to be here. But Emma, I'm dying." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? I'm dying, and I had to see you. I had to try to explain. I had to try to make things right before." He swayed on his feet, and I realized he wasn't just wet from the rain. He was pale, sweating, and looked like he might collapse at any moment. "Before what?" I asked, but he didn't answer. Instead, he gripped the doorframe and looked at me with an expression of such desperate hope that it broke something inside me. "I know you hate me," he said. "I know you have every right to hate me, but please, just let me explain. Let me tell you why I left. Let me tell you about the last 28 years. Let me tell you how not a single day has passed that I haven't thought about you." I stood there, frozen between past and present, between the hurt child and the grown woman, between the part of me that wanted to slam the door in his face and the part that had been waiting for this moment for 3 decades. "I don't hate you," I said finally, and realized it was true. "I don't hate you because I don't know you. You're a stranger to me." He flinched as if I'd slapped him, but he nodded. I know I am. But please, Emma, I'm asking for one night. One chance to tell you the truth, and then if you want me to leave and never come back, I will. I promise you that." The rational part of my brain was screaming warnings. This man was a stranger. He had abandoned me. He had let me believe he was dead. But the little girl inside me, the one who had waited by the window for months after he left, was stronger. "You're soaking wet," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He hesitated, as if he couldn't believe I was actually letting him in. Then he stepped across the threshold into my apartment, and with him came the scent of rain and cigarettes and something else, something that triggered a memory so vivid it took my breath away. His cologne, the same cologne he'd worn when I was little, faint now but still there. He stood in my entryway, dripping onto my hardwood floors, looking around at my life with wonder and sadness. His eyes took in my framed photos, my books, my plants by the window, the evidence of the life I'd built without him. "You have a beautiful home," he said softly. "Thank you," I replied, not knowing what else to say. "Let me get you a towel." I walked to the linen closet, my legs still unsteady, and grabbed a towel and a throw blanket. When I turned back, he was still standing exactly where I'd left him, as if he was afraid to move deeper into my space without permission. "Here," I said, handing him the towel. "You should get out of those wet clothes. I might have something that could fit you." He took the towel gratefully and began drying his hair. "Emma, I don't want to impose. I just needed to see you, to talk to you. I can find a hotel." "When's the last time you ate?" I interrupted, suddenly noticing how thin he was, how his clothes hung on his frame. He paused in his toweling. Today. I think I had something today." "You think?" "It's been a difficult few days. Getting here, finding you, working up the courage to knock on your door." I looked at this man, my father, this stranger, and felt something shift inside me. Whatever else he was, whatever he had done, he was clearly struggling. And despite everything, despite the years of abandonment and the lies about his death, I couldn't turn away from someone who needed help. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to my couch. "I'll make us some tea and something to eat, and then you can tell me everything." He sat down carefully, as if he wasn't sure the couch would support him, and wrapped the blanket around his shoulders. "Emma, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I said, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me, For the 7-year-old girl who never got answers. He nodded, understanding. Fair enough. I busied myself in the kitchen, putting the kettle on and searching through my cabinets for something simple to make. My hands were shaking as I pulled out bread and peanut butter, as I arranged crackers on a plate. The mundane tasks helped ground me, gave me something to focus on, besides the impossible fact that my father was sitting in my living room after 28 years. Emma, he said from the couch, his voice soft and uncertain, I need you to know something before we go any further. I paused in my sandwich making. What? I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not here to try to be your father again. I know it's too late for that. I'm here because I'm dying, and I need you to know the truth about why I left, about what happened to me, about why I never came back. I turned to face him, and in the soft light of my living room lamps, I could see the extent of his deterioration. His skin had a grayish pallor, his cheekbones were sharp with weight loss, and there was a tremor in his hands that he was trying to hide. How long? I asked. The doctors say weeks, maybe a month if I'm lucky. The sandwich suddenly felt heavy in my hands. What is it? Lung cancer, stage 4, spread to my liver, my bones. It's everywhere. I set the plate down and gripped the counter. Have you been alone? Yeah, he said simply. I've been alone for a long time. Something broke inside me then, not forgiveness exactly, but something softer than the anger I'd carried for so long. Maybe it was compassion. Maybe it was just the recognition that whatever he had done, however much he had hurt me, he was still a human being facing death alone. Well, I said, bringing the plate over to him, you're not alone tonight. He looked up at me with such gratitude that I had to look away. Thank you, Emma. You don't know what this means to me. Eat something, I said, settling into the chair across from him, and then tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Start from the day you left. He picked up the sandwich with trembling hands and took a small bite. It's going to be a long story. I have time, I said, and realized I meant it. I have all night. Outside, the rain continued to fall, drumming against the windows like a heartbeat. Inside, two strangers who shared blood and history and 28 years of silence prepared to bridge the gap between past and present, between abandonment and understanding, between the man who left and the woman who stayed. He ate in silence for a few minutes, and I watched him carefully. Every movement seemed deliberate, as if he was conserving energy for the story he was about to tell. When he finally set the sandwich down, half finished, he looked at me with those familiar blue eyes and began to speak. I need to start by telling you that everything your mother told you about me leaving was a lie, he said. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I didn't leave because I wanted to abandon my family. I left because I had to. I felt my defenses rising. You had to? That's your explanation? You had to? Please, Emma, let me finish. Let me tell you the whole story, and then you can judge me. I crossed my arms, but nodded. Go ahead. He leaned back against the couch cushions, his eyes distant, as if he was seeing into the past. Do you remember anything about the months before I left? About how I was acting? How things were at home? I searched my memory. I had been 7, and honestly, most of my memories from that time were fragmented. But as I thought about it, I did remember tension. Arguments between my parents that stopped when I entered the room. My father seeming distracted, jumpy, phone calls that he would take in the garage. I remember you and Mom fighting, I said slowly. I remember you being nervous about something. I was terrified, he said. Emma, I was involved with some very dangerous people. I had gotten in over my head and I was trying to get out, but they wouldn't let me. What kind of dangerous people? He rubbed his face with his hands. I was gambling. Started small, just friendly poker games with guys from work, but it escalated. Before I knew it, I was in debt to people who didn't accept "I can't pay" as an answer. I felt a chill run down my spine. How much debt? By the time I realized how serious it was, $50,000, which might as well have been $1 million to us back then. I remembered our small house in Portland, my father's job at the lumber mill, my mother's part-time work at the grocery store. We weren't poor, But we weren't rich either. $50,000 would have been devastating. I tried to handle it myself, he continued. I took on extra shifts. I borrowed against my 401k. I even sold my tools. But the interest kept piling up, and these weren't the kind of people who were patient about repayment. So you just left, I asked, not bothering to hide my anger. You just abandoned us instead of asking for help. Emma, you don't understand. These people threatened you. They threatened your mother. They knew where you went to school, knew your schedule. They told me that if I didn't pay up, they would hurt my family to send me a message. The words hit me like a physical blow. They threatened me. They showed me pictures of you walking to school. They knew which swing you liked at the playground. They knew that you had piano lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. His voice was shaking now. They made it very clear that the people I loved would pay for my debts if I couldn't. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. All these years, I had believed my father left because he didn't want us. But if what he was saying was true, so you left to protect us. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I disappeared, they would leave you alone and focus on finding me. I was supposed to be gone for a few weeks, just long enough to figure out how to get the money and make this right. But you never came back. His face crumpled. I never came back because I couldn't. Emma, when I left Portland, I went to California. I had a plan. I was going to work construction, live cheap, save every penny until I could pay off the debt. But they found me within a month. The people you owed money to? He nodded. They found me, and they made it clear that leaving wasn't an option. They had work for me to do, work that would pay off my debt. What kind of work? He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the shame in his eyes. I became a courier. I transported things from one place to another, no questions asked. I knew it was illegal, but I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was doing it for you and your mother. I felt sick. You were running drugs, sometimes. Sometimes it was money. Sometimes it was other things. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to know. He looked at me with desperate eyes. Emma, I know how this sounds. I know you must think I'm a coward, that I took the easy way out, but I was trapped. Every time I thought about coming home, they would remind me that they knew where you lived, that they could reach you anytime they wanted. So you just stayed for 28 years? Not exactly. He ran a hand through his graying hair. After about 5 years, I'd paid off the original debt, but by then I was in too deep. I knew too much about their operations. They made it clear that leaving wasn't an option, not if I wanted to keep you safe. But if you paid off the debt, it didn't matter. I had become valuable to them, and they had a very effective way of keeping me in line. They reminded me regularly that my family was still within reach. I stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked street. My mind was reeling. Everything I had believed about my childhood, about my father, about why he left, it was all wrong. So where have you been all these years? I asked without turning around. Everywhere. Los Angeles, Phoenix, Denver, Chicago. I moved around a lot, always working for the same people. I lived in cheap motels, small apartments, always ready to move at a moment's notice. And you never tried to contact us? I wanted to. God, Emma, every day I wanted to. I would drive by your school sometimes just to see you. I was there for your 8th grade graduation, standing in the back of the auditorium. I was there when you got your driver's license. I watched you take the test from across the street. I whirled around. You were watching me. I know it sounds creepy, but I needed to see that you were okay. I needed to know that you were safe, that you were growing up happy and healthy. I wasn't happy, I said, my voice harsh. I was miserable. I thought my father didn't love me enough to stay. I thought I had done something wrong to make him leave. The pain in his eyes was unmistakable. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Emma. Why didn't you just tell Mom the truth? Why did you let her think you abandoned us? He was quiet for a long moment. Because I was ashamed. And because I thought it would be easier for both of you to hate me than to live in fear. If you thought I was just a deadbeat who ran out on his family, you could move on. You could heal. But she told me you were dead. I know. I found out about that when you were 12. It nearly killed me, but I understood why she did it. She was trying to give you closure, trying to help you move on. I sank back into my chair, overwhelmed. So you've been alive all this time, watching from a distance, and we never knew. I kept track of you as best I could. I know you went to Portland State, that you studied journalism. I know you moved to Seattle 5 years ago, and that you work for a tech company now. I know you've never been married, but you dated a guy named Marcus for 3 years. The fact that he knew about Marcus was somehow the most shocking thing he'd said all night. How could you possibly know about Marcus? I hired a private investigator just to check on you periodically, to make sure you were safe and doing well. You hired someone to spy on me? I hired someone to watch over you, he corrected. Emma, those people I worked for, they're not forgiving. Even after all these years, I was never entirely sure that you were safe. I needed to know that no one was bothering you, that no one was using you to get to me. I felt invaded, violated. So my whole life, there's been someone watching me? Not all the time, just periodic checks. And I want you to know that I never interfered with your life. I never tried to influence your decisions or manipulate your circumstances. I just needed to know you were okay. But you never tried to come back? You never thought about just ending it, facing whatever consequences there might be? His face hardened. I thought about it every day for the first 10 years. But then something happened that reminded me why I had to stay away. What? When you were 17, someone broke into your house. Do you remember? I did remember. It was during my senior year of high school. Someone had broken in while Mom and I were at the grocery store. Nothing was taken, but the house had been ransacked. The police said it was probably kids looking for drugs or easy money, but they never caught anyone. That wasn't a random break-in, he said quietly. That was a message to me. What kind of message? That they could reach you anytime they wanted, that they hadn't forgotten about you, that I needed to stay in line. I felt like I was going to be sick. So someone broke into our house because of you? Yes. And when I confronted them about it, they made it clear that as long as I continued to work for them, you would be safe. But if I ever tried to leave, if I ever tried to contact you or your mother, they would make sure you paid the price. So you stayed. I stayed. And I worked for them for another 18 years, until 3 months ago. What happened 3 months ago? I got my diagnosis. And I realized that my time was running out. I also realized that the people I worked for were getting old, dying off, or going to prison. The organization was falling apart. So you decided to leave? I decided to die on my own terms. I told them I was done, that I was sick and wouldn't be working for them anymore. I expected them to kill me, honestly, but they just let me go. I think they figured that letting a dying man walk away was less trouble than dealing with the consequences of killing him. I stared at him, trying to process everything he had told me. And then you came here. I spent the last 3 months tracking you down. I knew you lived in Seattle, but I had to find your exact address. I had to work up the courage to knock on your door. I had to figure out what I was going to say to you. And what were you going to say? That I'm sorry, that I love you, that not a day has passed in 28 years that I haven't thought about you, that I'm proud of the woman you've become, that I know I can't ask for forgiveness, but I needed you to know the truth. I looked at this man, my father, this stranger who had sacrificed everything to protect me, and felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Sadness, compassion, maybe even the beginning of understanding. The private investigator, I said slowly. Is that how you knew about Eleanor? About the bedtime stories? He nodded. I asked him to find out everything he could about your childhood. I wanted to know what memories you had of me, what details might convince you that I was really your father. And he told you about Eleanor. He told me about a lot of things. He told me that you kept my picture on your nightstand until you were 14. He told me that you used to save me a seat at your school plays just in case I showed up. He told me that you chose Portland State partly because it was close to where we used to live, in case I ever came back. Tears were streaming down my face now. I did wait for you, For years I waited for you. I know, and I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there for you. I'm sorry that I missed your graduation, your first job, your first heartbreak. I'm sorry that I wasn't there to walk you down the aisle if you ever get married. I'm sorry that I won't be there to meet your children if you have them. You could have been there, I said through my tears. You could have chosen differently, maybe. But Emma, I need you to understand something. Every choice I made, every sacrifice I made was because I loved you more than my own life. I would rather live in exile, die alone, and have you safe and happy than risk your safety for my own happiness. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the coward I had imagined for so many years, but a man who had given up everything for his daughter. A man who had made an impossible choice and lived with the consequences for 3 decades. I believe you, I said softly. I believe that you thought you were protecting me. But I still don't know if it was the right choice. I still don't know if I can forgive you for all those years of thinking I wasn't worth staying for. He nodded. I understand. I don't expect forgiveness, Emma. I just wanted you to know the truth. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his revelations settling between us. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle patter, and the storm was beginning to pass. What happens now? I asked finally. Now I go back to my hotel, and tomorrow I fly back to Denver. I have some affairs to settle, some things to take care of before you die. Yes, I looked at this man who had shaped my entire life through his absence, who had loved me from a distance for 28 years, who had sacrificed everything for a daughter he barely knew, and I made a decision that surprised even me. What if you didn't go back to Denver? He looked at me with confusion. What do you mean? What if you stayed here? What if you spent whatever time you have left getting to know me, really getting to know me? His eyes filled with tears. Emma, I couldn't ask you to do that. I couldn't ask you to watch me die. You're not asking. I'm offering. I'm offering because I've spent 28 years without a father, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what it would have been like to have one. Are you sure? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything except that I didn't want him to disappear again. I didn't want to lose him twice. I'm sure, I said, but we need to do this right. We need to start over, get to know each other as we are now, not as the people we were 28 years ago. He nodded eagerly. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. And I want to know everything about your life, about the people you worked for, about what you've been doing all these years. No more secrets. No more secrets, he agreed. I looked out the window at the city lights reflecting on the wet streets and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Not for the future I had lost, but for the time we had left, however long that might be. The next few weeks passed in a blur of revelation and reconnection. David, I couldn't bring myself to call him Dad yet, moved into a small furnished apartment just 10 blocks from mine. The first thing I did was take him to the hospital, where the doctors confirmed what he had already told me. Stage 4 lung cancer, aggressive and inoperable. They gave him 6 to 8 weeks. We'll make them count, I told him as we sat in the oncologist's office, and he squeezed my hand with tears in his eyes. Those first days were awkward. We were like two people learning to dance together, stepping on each other's toes, unsure of the rhythm. I would catch myself watching him, looking for traces of the man I remembered from childhood, while he seemed to be marveling at the woman I had become. "You're so strong," he said one afternoon as we walked through Pike Place Market. He had insisted on seeing the city through my eyes, and I was showing him my favorite places. "When you were little, you were always so sensitive. You cried if you saw a sad commercial on TV. I'm still sensitive," I told him, stopping at a flower stand. "I just learned to hide it better." He bought me a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite, though I hadn't told him that. "Your mother always said you were like a sunflower, always turning toward the light." Talking about my mother was difficult. She had died 4 years earlier from breast cancer, and I had grieved alone, wishing I had family to share the burden. Now, learning that my father had been alive all that time, that he could have been there for me during the hardest period of my life, brought up a fresh wave of pain. "I wanted to come to the funeral," he said quietly, as we sat by the water at Alki Beach. "I stood in the parking lot of the cemetery for 2 hours, but I couldn't bring myself to go in. I didn't want to disrupt your grieving with my presence. I needed you there," I said, not looking at him. "I was completely alone." I know, and I'm sorry. I made a lot of wrong choices, Emma. I was so focused on keeping you physically safe that I forgot about keeping you emotionally safe. These conversations were hard, but they were necessary. I was learning to separate the choices he had made from the man he was now, and slowly I was beginning to understand that life rarely offers perfect solutions to impossible problems. The breakthrough came 2 weeks after his arrival. I had been helping him organize his belongings, the few things he had brought with him from Denver, when I found a shoebox filled with photographs. They were pictures of me throughout the years, obviously taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. "What is this?" I asked, holding up a photo of me at my high school graduation. He looked embarrassed. "I know it seems creepy, but I needed to see the moments I was missing. I needed to know that you were okay." I flipped through the photos. Me on my first day of college, me at my first job, me laughing with friends at a restaurant, me walking through the park. There were hundreds of them, spanning decades. "You were there for all of this," I said, not sure if I was angry or touched. "I was there, but I wasn't there. I was watching your life like a movie, but I wasn't part of it." At the bottom of the box, I found something that made my heart stop. A letter addressed to me, dated just 3 months ago. "What's this?" "I started writing to you when I got my diagnosis. I wanted to leave you something, some explanation of why I left, what my life had been like without you. But then I decided to come here instead, to try to tell you in person." I opened the letter with shaking hands. It was 20 pages long, handwritten in the careful script I remembered from my childhood. It was everything he had told me that first night, but written with the kind of raw honesty that only comes when someone thinks they're writing their last words. "My dearest Emma," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it anyway. I need to tell you that not a day has passed in 28 years that I haven't thought about you." I read the entire letter sitting on his couch while he watched nervously. When I finished, I was crying so hard I could barely speak. "You really did love me," I said through my tears. "All this time, you really did love me. I never stopped loving you," he said, sitting down beside me. "Emma, you were the sun in my universe. Everything I did, every choice I made was because I loved you." For the first time in 28 years, I let him hug me, really hug me. And as I felt his arms around me, I realized that somewhere in the process of getting to know this man, I had forgiven him. Not for the pain his absence had caused, but for the impossible situation he had found himself in. "I want to call you Dad," I said into his shoulder. "Is that okay?" I felt him start to cry then, deep, silent sobs that shook his whole body. "I thought I'd never hear you say that again." "Dad," I said again, testing the word. It felt strange and familiar at the same time. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me that." After that, things changed between us. The awkwardness melted away, replaced by a kind of urgent intimacy. We both knew our time was limited, so we made every moment count. He told me stories about his childhood, about meeting my mother, about the early days of their marriage. I told him about my life, my dreams, my fears, my relationships. "I'm proud of you," he said one evening as we cooked dinner together in my apartment. "You turned out to be an incredible woman despite having an absent father." "Maybe because of it," I said, stirring the pasta sauce. "Maybe I had to become strong because I didn't have anyone to lean on. I wish I could have been there to see you become strong. I wish I could have been there to catch you when you fell. You're here now," I said simply. "That has to count for something." He was quiet for a moment, watching me cook. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think you'll ever have children?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know. Maybe. Why?" "Because if you do, I want you to know that they'll have a grandfather who loved them even before they were born. Even if I'm not here to meet them, I want you to tell them about me, not about the mistakes I made, but about how much I loved their mother. I had to turn away to hide my tears. I'll tell them, I promised. As his health declined, our conversations became more precious. He was losing weight rapidly, and some days he was too tired to do much more than sit and talk, but those talks became the foundation of a relationship I had thought was lost forever. I need to tell you about the money, he said one afternoon as we sat in his apartment. He had been increasingly concerned about practical matters as his condition worsened. What money? All these years I've been saving every penny I could. I lived like a monk, Emma. Cheap motels, fast food, second-hand clothes. Everything I didn't spend on survival, I saved for you, for me. I have a safety deposit box in Denver with $340,000 in cash. It's yours. There's also a life insurance policy that I've been paying into for 25 years. Another $200,000. I stared at him in shock. Dad, that's over $500,000. It's not enough to make up for 28 years of absence, but it's something. It's my way of trying to provide for you, even though I couldn't be there to do it in person. I don't want your money, I said automatically. Yes, you do, he said with a weak smile. You want to buy a house. You want to travel to Europe. You want to quit your corporate job and freelance. You want to take photography classes. How could you possibly know all that? Because I know you, because I've been watching you, learning about you, caring about your dreams even from a distance. He was right, of course. Those were exactly the things I wanted, but couldn't afford on my current salary. There's also something else, he said, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a small wooden box. I made this for you. Inside the box was a necklace with a pendant shaped like a sunflower. It was clearly handmade, carved from wood and polished to a golden shine. You made this? I took up woodworking about 10 years ago. It gave me something to do with my hands, something to focus on besides missing you. I've made you something every year for your birthday. They're all in a storage unit in Denver. You made me birthday presents? 28 of them. Jewelry boxes, picture frames, a rocking chair, a dining table. I imagined giving them to you someday, maybe if I ever got brave enough to contact you. I put on the necklace, and it felt like a piece of my father's love settling against my heart. It's beautiful. You're beautiful, he said, inside and out. You're everything I hoped you would become. That night, I stayed with him because he was having trouble breathing. As I sat beside his bed, watching him sleep fitfully, I realized how grateful I was that he had found the courage to knock on my door. Yes, I was angry about the lost years. Yes, I grieved for the relationship we could have had, but I was also grateful for the relationship we were building now, in whatever time we had left. Emma, he said softly in the darkness, I'm here, Dad. I need to ask you for something, and you can say no if you want to. What is it? When the time comes, when I'm dying, I don't want to be in a hospital. I want to be with you. Is that too much to ask? I reached for his hand in the darkness. It's not too much to ask. When the time comes, you'll be with me. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for letting me be your father again, even if it's just for a little while. Thank you for coming back, I said. Thank you for being brave enough to knock on my door. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day with him, looking through old photo albums and sharing memories. We talked about my mother, about the good times before everything went wrong. We talked about his parents who had died while he was in exile, and about family members I had never known I had. I have cousins, I asked, looking at a photo of a family reunion from before I was born. 3 of them, my sister's kids. They live in Oregon, not far from where we used to live. I haven't seen them in 30 years, but I kept track of them too. Do you think they'd want to meet me? I think they'd love to meet you. I think they've always wondered what happened to us. I made a mental note to contact them after. It was strange to think that this tragedy was also opening doors to relationships I had never known were possible. As the days passed, I watched my father fade. The strong, mysterious figure who had knocked on my door was becoming frail, dependent, mortal. But in his weakness, I found a different kind of strength. I found the courage to forgive, to love, to hope. I'm not afraid of dying, he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from his apartment window. I'm only afraid of leaving you alone again. I won't be alone, I assured him. I have friends, I have a life I've built, and now I have the truth about where I came from. That's more than I've had in 28 years. You have more than that, he said, squeezing my hand. You have a father who loves you. Even when I'm gone, you'll still have that. Looking at him, I realized he was right. Love doesn't end with death. The love he had carried for me all these years, the love I was learning to feel for him, would continue long after he was gone. I love you too, Dad, I said, and meant it completely. I know, he said, with a peaceful smile. I can see it in your eyes. It's the same way you used to look at me when you were little, like I was your hero. You are my hero, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Maybe not in the way I thought when I was 7, but you're my hero for carrying this burden alone for so long. You're my hero for loving me enough to sacrifice everything for my safety. Udurten, as we sat there watching the sun set over Seattle, I realized that sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones that go unseen, unacknowledged, unappreciated for decades. Sometimes heroes don't get parades or recognition. Sometimes they just get to sit with their daughters and know that they are loved in return. Dad died on a Tuesday morning in November, 6 weeks after he had knocked on my door. He passed peacefully in my apartment, with me holding his hand and sunlight streaming through the windows. His last words were, "Thank you for letting me come home." The funeral was small, just me, a few of my friends, and surprisingly 3 people I had never met before, my cousins from Oregon. They had driven up as soon as I called them, and they embraced me like the family I had never known I had. "Uncle David used to talk about you all the time when we were kids," my cousin Sarah told me after the service. "When he disappeared, we always wondered what happened to you and Aunt Linda." "He never disappeared," I said, looking at the simple headstone we had chosen together during his final week. "He was always there. We just couldn't see him." In the weeks that followed, I discovered just how present he had been in my life. When I went to Denver to settle his affairs, I found the storage unit he had mentioned. It was filled with the birthday presents he had made for me over the years, beautiful, intricate pieces of furniture and artwork, each one labeled with the year and a note about what was happening in my life at the time. "Happy 16th birthday, Emma," read one note attached to a jewelry box. "I heard you got your driver's license. I'm so proud of you for being responsible and careful. Bye." "Happy 25th birthday," read another attached to a rocking chair. "I hope someday you'll rock your own children in this chair and tell them about their grandfather who loved them before they were born." I cried as I read each note, as I examined each carefully crafted piece. This storage unit was like a museum of a father's love, a testament to the fact that distance doesn't diminish devotion. There was also a file cabinet filled with newspaper clippings, every article I had ever written for my college newspaper, every mention of my name in local publications, even a photo from my company newsletter when I received a promotion. He had been documenting my life from afar, celebrating my achievements in secret. The financial information he had given me was all accurate. The safety deposit box contained exactly $340,000 in cash, along with a collection of bonds and investments that brought the total to nearly $400,000. The life insurance policy paid out another $200,000, just as he had promised. But more valuable than the money were the letters. He had written me one letter every year on my birthday, letters he never intended to send but couldn't stop himself from writing. 28 letters chronicling his love, his regrets, his hopes for my future, his pride in my accomplishments. "My dearest Emma," began the letter from my 21st birthday. "Today, you're officially an adult. Though I know you've been taking care of yourself for years. I wish I could take you out for your first legal drink, but instead, I'm sitting in a bar in Phoenix toasting you from 200 miles away. The bartender thinks I'm crazy, but I don't care. I'm proud of my daughter and I want the world to know it. Reading these letters, I began to understand that in some ways, I had never really been alone. My father had been with me in spirit for every milestone, every triumph, every heartbreak. He had been the invisible presence cheering me on from the shadows. I used some of the money to quit my corporate job and start freelancing, just as he had somehow known I wanted to do. I used more of it to travel to Europe, taking the photography classes I had always dreamed of, and I used a portion to establish a scholarship fund at Portland State University for students who had grown up without fathers, in honor of David Mitchell, my dad. 6 months after his death, I was contacted by Agent Rebecca Martinez from the FBI. She came to my apartment on a sunny afternoon in May, carrying a folder full of documents that would change my understanding of my father's story once again. "Ms. Sullivan," she said, as we sat in my living room, "I need to talk to you about your father's work with the Bureau." "With the Bureau? You mean the FBI?" "Yes. Your father was a confidential informant for us for the last 15 years of his life." I stared at her in shock. "He was working for you?" "He contacted us in 2010, wanting to provide information about the criminal organization he had been forced to work for. He spent years helping us build cases against them, always at great personal risk. But he said he was trapped, that he couldn't leave. He was trapped, but he found a way to fight back. The information he provided led to the arrests of dozens of people involved in drug trafficking, money laundering, and organized crime. He saved countless lives, Ms. Sullivan." Agent Martinez opened her folder and showed me photographs of men in handcuffs, newspaper headlines about major drug busts, court documents detailing convictions. "Operation Homecoming," she said, pointing to one headline, "was based almost entirely on intelligence your father provided. 37 arrests, millions of dollars in drugs and illegal weapons seized. He never told me any of this. He couldn't. His safety, and yours, depended on absolute secrecy. But I want you to know that your father was a hero, Ms. Sullivan. He spent 15 years working to bring down the people who had destroyed his life and threatened his family." I looked at the evidence spread across my coffee table and felt a new wave of grief and pride wash over me. My father hadn't just been a victim of circumstances. He had been fighting back, working to make sure other families didn't suffer the way we had. "There's something else," Agent Martinez said gently. "The reason he was finally able to leave, the reason they let him go when he got sick. We had dismantled enough of their operation that they no longer had the power to threaten you. Your father's work had made you safe. So when he came to see me, he was finally free to be your father again. He had spent 15 years earning that freedom. After Agent Martinez left, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the evidence of my father's courage and sacrifice. I thought about the man who had knocked on my door 7 months earlier, sick and desperate and afraid I would turn him away. I thought about the stories he had told me, the love he had shown me, the time we had spent together rebuilding our relationship. But mostly, I thought about his last words. "Thank you for letting me come home." He hadn't just meant coming home to Seattle, or to my apartment, or to my life. He had meant coming home to being my father. After 28 years of exile, 15 years of dangerous undercover work, and a lifetime of sacrifice, he had finally been able to come home to the role he had never stopped wanting to play. That evening, I called my cousin Sarah in Oregon. We had been staying in touch since the funeral, slowly building the family connections that my father's situation had severed. "I have something to tell you about Uncle David," I said, and I shared what Agent Martinez had revealed. "That explains so much," Sarah said when I finished. "He was always so paranoid when we were kids, always looking over his shoulder. We thought he was just weird, but he must have already been in trouble. He was protecting all of us," I said, "even you and your family. He stayed away to keep everyone safe. He was a hero," Sarah said simply, "a real hero." A year after my father's death, I used some of his money to buy a small house in the suburbs of Seattle. It has a workshop in the garage where I've started learning woodworking, using tools that once belonged to him. I'm not very good at it yet, but I'm getting better. I'm making a rocking chair using the same design as the one he made for my 25th birthday. Someday, I hope to rock my own children in that chair and tell them about their grandfather, not the man who abandoned his family, but the man who sacrificed everything to protect them. I'll tell them about his courage, his love, his determination to make things right. I'll tell them about the 28 years he spent watching over me from a distance, and the 6 weeks we spent getting to know each other before he died. I'll tell them that sometimes love looks like leaving, and sometimes it looks like coming back. Sometimes it looks like knocking on a door in the rain when you're not sure you'll be welcome, and sometimes it looks like opening that door even when you're not sure you're ready. Most importantly, I'll tell them that love never really leaves. It just changes form, adapts to circumstances, finds new ways to manifest itself. My father loved me for 28 years without being able to show it directly, and now he loves me from whatever comes after this life in ways I'm still discovering. The sunflower necklace he made for me never leaves my neck. Every morning when I put it on, I remember his words, "You're like a sunflower, always turning toward the light." I think about that metaphor often now. For most of my life, I thought the light had gone out when my father left, but I was wrong. The light was always there. I just had to learn how to see it. Sometimes the light is obvious, like sunshine streaming through windows. But sometimes it's subtle, like the warmth you feel when someone loves you from a distance, or the peace you find when you finally understand a difficult truth. My father spent his last years turning toward the light of redemption, working with the FBI to right the wrongs of his past. He spent his final weeks turning toward the light of reconciliation, building a relationship with the daughter he had never stopped loving. And he died in the light of forgiveness, knowing that he was loved and accepted despite his mistakes. Now I try to follow his example. I turn toward the light of new relationships, like the growing friendship with my Oregon cousins. I turn toward the light of new possibilities, like the freelance career that allows me to tell stories that matter. I turn toward the light of hope, believing that the future can be better than the past. And sometimes, when the afternoon sun hits my apartment windows just right, I swear I can feel him there with me. Not as a ghost or a supernatural presence, but as a continuing influence, a lasting love, a reminder that family isn't just about the time you spend together, it's about the love that connects you across time and distance and even death. He knocked on my door 28 years later and collapsed, saying, "I'm still your father." He was right. He is still my father. He always will be. And finally, after all these years, I understand what that really means. 3 years have passed since that rainy October night when my father knocked on my door, and I'm constantly amazed by how one moment of courage can change everything that follows. Not just for the people directly involved, but for everyone whose lives they touch. I'm sitting in my new photography studio now, a converted warehouse space in Georgetown that I was able to purchase with Dad's inheritance. The afternoon light streams through the massive windows, casting geometric shadows across the polished concrete floors. It's the kind of light photographers dream about, but more than that, it's become a symbol of the clarity I've found in my life since his return. The studio isn't just my workspace, it's become a community hub. Every month I host a support group for adults who grew up with absent parents. We call it Second Chances, and it's grown from just me and 3 other people to over 40 regular attendees. The stories I hear there remind me daily that my father and I weren't alone in our struggle. "Emma, there's someone here to see you," calls my assistant Marcus. Yes, the same Marcus I dated years ago. We reconnected 6 months after Dad died, when he reached out to offer condolences. Our romantic relationship had ended amicably, but our friendship had endured, and when I needed help getting the studio off the ground, he was the first person I called. He's become not just my business partner, but one of my closest friends. "Send them back," I say, adjusting the lighting setup for this afternoon's portrait session. A woman in her 40s walks into the studio, nervously clutching a manila envelope. She has the look of someone who's been carrying a heavy secret for a long time. I've learned to recognize that expression from the support group. Miss Sullivan, I'm Janet Torres. I think I knew your father. My heart skips a beat. Even 3 years later, unexpected connections to Dad's past still catch me off guard. Please, sit down. Tell me how you knew him. Janet settles into one of the comfortable chairs I keep in the consultation area. I was a prosecutor in Los Angeles from 2012 to 2018. I worked on several cases that involved information from a confidential informant the FBI called Sunflower. The nickname sends chills down my spine. Agent Martinez had mentioned that Dad used code names, but she'd never told me what they were. Sunflower, I asked. We never knew his real name, of course, but the intelligence he provided was extraordinary, detailed, accurate, often putting himself at tremendous risk. Janet opens the envelope and pulls out a thick file. After Agent Martinez contacted me about your father's death, I did some digging through old case files. I wanted you to see the impact his work had. She spreads photographs across my desk. Crime scenes, evidence photos, booking shots of arrested criminals. This drug ring was supplying fentanyl to high schools across 3 states. Your father's information led us to their distribution network and probably saved hundreds of teenage lives. I pick up a photo of a young girl, maybe 16, smiling in what looks like a school picture. Who's this? That's my daughter, Sophia. She was 17 when she overdosed on fentanyl she bought at school. She survived, barely, and went into treatment. But that same dealer sold to 12 other kids in her school. 3 of them died. Janet's voice breaks slightly. Your father's intelligence helped us trace the supply chain back to its source. We arrested the dealer, his suppliers, everyone up the line. Sophia has been clean for 4 years now, and she's studying to be a counselor. She wants to help other kids avoid the path she went down. I stare at the photograph, thinking about this girl I've never met whose life was saved by my father's dangerous work. She doesn't know about my dad, does she? No one knew. That was the point. But I wanted you to know that his sacrifice meant something. It meant Sophia gets to graduate college next month. It meant those other kids got a second chance. After Janet leaves, I sit alone in my studio, surrounded by the evidence of lives saved by a man who thought he was a coward. I think about the ripple effect of his choices, how his decision to work with the FBI didn't just protect me, but protected countless other families from the devastation of drugs and violence. My phone buzzes with a text from my cousin Sarah. Uncle David's birthday is next week. Want to do something to remember him? Every year since his death, our newly reconnected family has found ways to honor Dad's memory. Last year, we planted a garden at his gravesite. The year before, we donated woodworking tools to a local community center in his name. This year, I have a different idea. I call Sarah back. What would you think about starting a scholarship fund? Not just at Portland State, but for kids whose parents are involved with law enforcement, undercover work, dangerous assignments, things that require them to be absent for their children's protection. That's perfect, Sarah says immediately. Uncle David would love that. He'd love knowing that other kids wouldn't have to grow up wondering if their parent loved them. I'll match whatever we raise, I say. And I want to call it the Sunflower Foundation. The next week, we announce the foundation at Dad's graveside on what would have been his 64th birthday. It's a small gathering. Me, Sarah and her family, Marcus, a few friends from the support group, and Agent Martinez, who has become an unexpected friend over the years. David would be proud of all of you, Agent Martinez says as we stand around his headstone. He spent 15 years believing he was failing as a father, never knowing that his sacrifice was teaching his daughter how to love unconditionally. After everyone else leaves, I stay behind, sitting cross-legged on the grass beside his grave. I do this sometimes when I need to think through big decisions or when I'm feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of life. Hey, Dad, I say quietly. I hope you're okay with us using the Sunflower name. I know it was supposed to be secret, but it feels right. You always said I was like a sunflower, always turning toward the light. Now I want to help other kids learn to do the same thing." The wind rustles through the oak tree above his headstone, and for a moment I let myself believe it's his way of saying yes. 6 months later, the Sunflower Foundation has raised over $150,000. We've awarded our first 3 scholarships to children of undercover officers, including a 17-year-old girl whose father has been deep undercover with a drug cartel for 2 years. She's never been able to tell anyone why her dad is gone, why he misses her birthday parties and school plays. "Your foundation gave me hope," she writes in her thank you letter. "It made me realize that my dad's absence doesn't mean he doesn't love me. It means he loves me so much that he's willing to sacrifice his own happiness to keep other families safe." Reading her letter, I'm struck by how similar her words are to something I might have written as a teenager if I had understood the truth about my father's situation. The cycle is breaking. This girl won't have to wait 28 years to understand her father's love. But perhaps the most unexpected development has been the effect of sharing Dad's story publicly. After I started speaking at conferences about law enforcement families, about addiction recovery, about the long-term effects of absent parents, people began reaching out with their own stories. There was the woman whose husband was murdered by the crime family her father had been investigating, leaving her to raise 3 children alone. There was the man whose FBI agent father missed his entire childhood because of a deep cover assignment that lasted 15 years. There was the teenager whose mother disappeared when she was 8, only to discover years later that Mom had been forced into witness protection after testifying against organized crime. Each story reminded me that my father and I weren't unique. Thousands of families make these impossible sacrifices every day, and most of them do it in complete silence. "You're giving people permission to grieve," my therapist told me during one of our sessions. Yes, I started seeing a therapist about a year after Dad died, when I realized that processing 3 decades of misunderstood abandonment was more than I could handle alone. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Most people in your situation never get closure. They never learn the truth about why their parent left. You're showing them that it's okay to mourn the relationship you missed, even if you understand the reasons behind it. You're showing them that understanding doesn't automatically equal healing." She was right. Speaking publicly about my experience had connected me with a community I never knew existed, people who loved parents they barely knew, people who had been protected by sacrifices they didn't understand until it was too late. This has led to my latest project, a documentary about families affected by undercover law enforcement work. Marcus is helping me film it, and we've already interviewed over 30 families across the country. The stories are heartbreaking and inspiring in equal measure. There's Agent David Chen, who spent 12 years infiltrating human trafficking organizations, missing his twin daughter's entire childhood to save other children from slavery. His daughters are adults now, and they're just beginning to understand the magnitude of what he sacrificed for them. There's Detective Maria Santos, whose undercover work with drug cartels required her to fake her own death and assume a new identity. Her son grew up believing his mother was dead, only to discover the truth when he turned 18 and was finally deemed safe enough to know. These families are the invisible casualties of our justice system, people who sacrifice their most precious relationships to protect society from its worst elements. Their stories need to be told, not for sympathy, but for understanding. The documentary has also given me a chance to explore the broader implications of my father's choices. I've interviewed psychologists about the long-term effects of parental absence, sociologists about the hidden costs of law enforcement work, and policy experts about ways to better support these families. What I've learned is that my father's situation, while extreme, reflects a broader problem in how we handle dangerous law enforcement work. Families are often left completely in the dark about why their loved ones have to be absent, creating unnecessary trauma and misunderstanding. There has to be a better way. I say to the camera during one of my interview segments, there has to be a way to protect both the officers and their families physically and emotionally. Some police departments are starting to listen. They're developing new protocols for supporting families of undercover officers, including counseling services and carefully managed communication systems that allow limited contact while maintaining operational security. It's not a perfect solution, but it's progress. It means that other children won't have to grow up believing they weren't worth staying for. As I put the finishing touches on the documentary, tentatively titled The Sunflower Code: Hidden Families of Law Enforcement, I find myself thinking about legacy. Not just my father's legacy, but the legacy I want to leave. Dad thought his legacy was abandonment and failure. He couldn't see that his real legacy was love expressed through sacrifice, courage demonstrated through impossible choices, and strength maintained through decades of silent suffering. My legacy, I hope, will be different. I want to be remembered as someone who turned pain into purpose, who used her platform to give voice to the voiceless, who helped other people find their way back to the light. The studio has become a gathering place for this community we've built. Every month, in addition to the support group, we host Second Sundays, a casual brunch where law enforcement families can connect with each other. Kids who've grown up with absent parents can meet other kids who understand their experience. Spouses can share the burden of loving someone whose job requires them to live a double life. Today is one of those Sundays, and the studio is filled with laughter and conversation. Marcus is manning the coffee station, chatting with a retired DEA agent whose daughter is one of our scholarship recipients. Sarah and her teenage son are playing chess in the corner with a boy whose mother is currently undercover with a domestic terrorism group. This is what healing looks like, I think. Not the absence of pain, but the transformation of pain into connection. Not the forgetting of loss, but the remembering of love. "Emma," calls a voice from across the room. It's Sophia Torres, Janet's daughter, the girl whose life was saved by Dad's intelligence work. She's become a regular at our gatherings, and she's planning to apply for one of our scholarships next year. "What's up, Sophia? I wanted to show you something." She pulls out her phone and shows me a photo of a group of teenagers. "These are kids from my recovery program. I've been telling them about your dad, about how he helped save my life without me ever knowing it. They want to do something to honor him. What did you have in mind?" "A memorial garden at the treatment center. We want to plant sunflowers and put up a plaque that says, 'In memory of all the invisible heroes who save lives from the shadows.'" Would that be okay?" I have to blink back tears. "Sophia, that would be more than okay. That would be perfect." As the afternoon winds down and our guests begin to leave, I find myself alone in the studio again, surrounded by the evidence of the community that has grown from one man's courage to knock on his daughter's door. I walk over to the wall where I've hung a collection of photos from our events, smiling faces of people who have found family in the most unexpected places, who have discovered that their stories of loss and love are not unique burdens, but shared experiences that connect us all. In the center of the wall hangs the last photo ever taken of my father and me together. We're sitting on my couch, both of us laughing at something he had just said. He looks frail but happy, and I look like someone who has finally found what she had been searching for her whole life. Below that photo is a small plaque with his favorite quote, something he said to me during one of our last conversations. "Love isn't measured by the time you spend together, but by the sacrifices you're willing to make for each other." He was right, of course. He had been loving me sacrificially for 28 years before I ever understood what that meant. Now I try to love others the same way, through service, through advocacy, through creating spaces where healing can happen. As I lock up the studio and head home to my house with its workshop full of half-finished woodworking projects, I think about the 7-year-old girl who used to wait by the window for her father to come home. She finally got her wish, just not in the way she expected. He did come home. He came home to tell the truth, to share his love, to pass on his legacy of courage and sacrifice. And in coming home, he taught me that sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give their child isn't their presence, but the strength to build a meaningful life even in their absence. The sunflower necklace moves against my chest as I walk, a constant reminder that even in the darkest times, we can choose to turn toward the light. My father spent 28 years in the darkness, but he never stopped reaching for the light of redemption, reconciliation, and love. Now it's my turn to be the light for others who are lost in their own darkness, searching for their own way home.